Hi, this is Josh Kulp. We are doing the video for Daf Kaf Tet, page 29 of Masechet Avodah Zarah. And we're entering into here what I think is some of the most interesting Mishnayot, some of the most interesting material, not just of Masechet Kiddushin, but really of the entire Talmud. As somebody who's been teaching Talmud for about 20 some odd years, maybe 22, 23 years, I can tell you that my experience is these are among the most learned, most taught pages of the Talmud, at least in the circles in which I run in, because they're very relatable and they relate to men and women's roles in our world. And there's also a few other subjects that come up of great interest at the end of this parak. So I wanted to just make a couple of notes about the role of women as reflected in this Mishnah. In my commentary, I wrote that I am not going to deal with this in the commentary. It's not really germane to explaining the material. It's more background material, so I think it's better for the video. This Mishnah is the source of something that a lot of people know, and people who have at least been around traditional Judaism, that women have been traditionally made exempt from positive time-bound commandments. Positive means it's something that you do, and time-bound means that there's a particular time in which that mitzvah has to be fulfilled. A classic example is shofar. Shofar is a time-bound commandment. It can only be fulfilled on Rosh Hashanah, and it's positive. It's something you do. Sukkah, lulav, those are also classical examples. Positive commandments that are not time-bound include something like mezuzah. There's no time of the day in which you're obligated for the mezuzah. And there are negative commandments, no lack of negative commandments. So in positive, non-time-bound commandments, women's obligation was always considered to be equal. In negative commandments, women's obligation was always considered to be equal unless it was something that was like only germane to one of the genders. But in positive time-bound commandments is where we find this discrimination between men and women. It's a discrimination that, let's say, Orthodox Jews, non-egalitarian Orthodox Jews, are living with until this day. Also because there's a concept in halacha that if you're obligated for a mitzvah, you can help another person fulfill that mitzvah. If you're not obligated in that mitzvah, you cannot. So if you're obligated to blow the shofar, you can blow the shofar on behalf of other people. If you're not obligated to blow the shofar, you cannot. Two mitzvot I want to sort of leave off this conversation. One is a prayer. Prayer, actually, women are obligated for prayer. It's a complicated discussion, but the Mishnah in Brachot clearly says women are obligated in prayer. And Kriyat Shema, prayer, I meant the Amidah. Kriyat Shema is a positive time-bound commandment. According to the Mishnah in Brachot, women are exempt, but it's not a mitzvah that you need to fulfill for somebody else, so it's not all that much of an issue for a woman to serve as a prayer leader. But the question that often comes up is why this distinction? And you can find various authors who've discussed it. Judith Hauptman talks about it in a book written at least 20, maybe 30 years ago called Rereading the Rabbis. And it's been discussed by many people. I think that probably the only reason that's ever had much much traction with me is that women in the time period were, generally speaking, their time was not at their own disposal. In other words, women had less choice as to how to spend their time. They were subject to the authority at that time of their husbands, and therefore they didn't have the ability to decide, at this point of time, I'm going to fulfill this mitzvah. And therefore they were held exempt. It also, I think, lends itself to the idea that certain ritual mitzvot, there is a hierarchy between men and women, which I read as being reflective of the society at the time. I think from the time I was a young boy in USY, I always thought that this halacha made sense for their time. It doesn't make sense for our time, in which women are, at least should be, and are increasingly and relatively close in terms of human history to be considered universally equal to men. There are no denying it, still discrepancies in income, in pay scales, and in certain leadership positions. But I think that at least the society in which we associate strives and should be striving for full equality. And to me, it's always made sense that therefore halacha should be a reflection of society, a society in which genders are not equal. While I don't support, I can understand that how that inequality is reflected in halacha, in a society which strives to provide equality to genders, and which believes that there is no hierarchy between men and women. I simply do not understand anymore a hierarchy between men and women in ritual matters, beyond the fact that it's traditional in traditional circles, and there's a hesitance to change tradition, which, to be honest with you, I do respect, and I understand that, and I understand where people are coming from. So that's my 2 cents for what it's worth on this issue. You're not going to see it reflected in the commentary. In the commentary, I just sort of interpret the sources as they are, but I thought it was worthwhile talking about that a little bit in this video. I hope you enjoy these dafim. They're wonderful, and as always, please participate in discussion on the Facebook Daf Shevui group.